Okay, everybody's mics are on?
Billy, I can't talk now. I'm in a meeting. Goodbye.
Okay. Guy is out today, so I am Todd Yankee filling in as chair. So I'd like to open the October 19th, 2022 Freeport Project Review Board meeting, and we will start with item 1, information exchange.
So first up, we have staff approvals. The staff approvals were in your digital packet, but I'll show it on screen here. We had one staff approval for replacement signage. This is for Pet Medic. They're going down in Freeport Crossing near Shaw's. They're replacing a existing sign over an entrance. You can see here, ignore the veterinary quick care, that's a previous tenant. And then they're also replacing the sign face on the kiosk sign along the road. Number 2, the planning board continues their long ongoing discussion about cannabis. They're getting closer to a public hearing. It's at the town attorney for legal review. I think they'll have one final run through this month, and then next month they'll probably go to hearing on the new possible cannabis uses in town. They have not taken action on the site plan changes yet. We're gonna do that at the same time we do cannabis due to the extensive notification that is involved in that process. But then they recently made some additional changes to our non-conforming language in the zoning ordinance. One that was approved by the council last night. They previously did language to allow expansions to non-conforming structures. Last night was to allow alterations to legally non-conforming lots that either predate zoning or predate an amendment to the zoning ordinance. So the way it was written in the past is if you had a legally non-conforming lot, you could not alter it because then you essentially created a violation because you created a lot that wasn't conforming. So the change last night would allow you to alter that lot if you don't increase any of the nonconformities. So for example, if you live in the rural zone, you had an acre, you wanted to add a half an acre, you could now get up to an acre and a half and not lose that non-conforming status, but still not conform, but be working towards conformity. It's a request we've got on and off over the years for people that, in this case, we had a property owner that wanted to add a buffer due to a commercial use, and he couldn't because he had a non-conforming lot. So that was the scenario that applied. So that's a snapshot of what the planning board's been up to. And then third, we have an update on the Freeport Downtown Vision Plan implementation. The town council had a big community workshop last week at the community center. I think we probably had, Todd was there, Linda was there, over 100 people in participation. So there's been that task force, which I've been reporting on monthly. They've gone through the 80+ ideas of goals and projects that were presented in the downtown village implementation table, and they've narrowed it down to about 24. So they presented that narrowed down list to the community and the council for review, discussion. It was kind of a workshop set up with different stations. You could go around to the guiding principles, see which there were 6 or 7 identified in the vision. You could see which projects kind of made the short list, kind of who their supporters were, like things that this board might have supported, or the planning board, or social racial equity committee, and kind of ask questions to the different committee members, which is why, Todd and Linda were there for some of the work that they've been doing. I believe that short list will go to the council for some future action. Next steps are kind of pending due to, waiting for elections and kind of a lull in the council meeting schedule. But that conversation continues to move forward. If you had interest in the meeting and you couldn't make it, it was recorded, or a modified version. They couldn't record all the workshop stations, but you can still get most of the material. You can view that on the town's website. If you go to video services, you can pull up the workshop from last Tuesday. Also, we are still doing regular email updates. If you don't get the vision newsletter and you're interested, just send me an email. I'll add you to the list. We try to send an email out about once a month. Anything I missed, Linda or Todd, on that community workshop that you want to add?
It sounded like next steps were to start prioritize in terms of, what's the low-hanging fruit, what can be done up front, what's feasible to do up front, what funding may be available to pick off things that way, and to start prioritizing and trying to assign some dollars to them as well, and also level of effort too. to implement them as well. But there's definitely a lot of different moving pieces.
The only thing I would report to here, to this group, is there was a lot of commentary, or not a lot, but commentary on parking and removal of parking, or, what used to be, what's now, and that seemed to be one of those hot buttons that came up.
Yeah, and I also heard, along with parking, related to parking, was also traffic flow,
Mhm. Yeah.
Yep.
And
both
housing.
pedestrian and vehicle.
And housing issues were also, it'll be ongoing forever
Yeah, I
and ever.
think Complete Streets is in the early phases of looking at some of our downtown parking, knowing that we're gonna have some changes in uses. Today I just was in a meeting, and related to that, people wanna look at the signage. We have signs everywhere, but nobody knows where to park. And then in regards to housing, the council actually started having a public workshop, which I think I reported to you on the last meeting, about housing, and so I think we'll see some community discussions continue as we go forward into early winter, that if anyone wants to be involved in on their own, they can definitely do that.
Yeah, from that side of things, which is more my other side of things, they did say they were going to create a housing committee or some sort of housing authority. It wasn't done yet. I thought it was going to be brought up last night, but I didn't hear it when I was listening. But that is something that will be going forward, and then there'll be implications for zoning and regulations and all kinds of stuff that'll get involved, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, I think their next regular meeting, Peter, would be in December, probably be the earliest they could take that up.
First Tuesday. We did talk about having a special meeting in possibly the late half of November, though, with the go on business.
So late November, early December would be the earliest.
Just had a question. When do the new town councilors get sworn in?
Usually the Tuesday following the election.
Okay. So it's really quick.
Yeah, I should say, the Tuesday following the election, they will be sworn in.
Okay.
Whether it's the election or the
Okay.
Yeah, they meet, that's the first one.
Okay.
So the outgoing councilors will be there.
Yeah. Okay, great. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Item 2 is review of the minutes and adoption of the minutes from our last meeting of September 21st, 2022. Are there any comments? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Okay. And because we don't have anyone, we can just do a hand vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Okay. Unanimously approved. Now we get into our business. Item number 3, reviews. The Daniel Residence, South Street Design Review Certificate.
Before I start that, I just want to remind you, from the last meeting, you had a Mylar that was going to be at this meeting to sign, so before everyone runs away at the end of, I'm dating myself, it's no longer Mylar, it's paper. But at the end of the meeting, before you take off, please make sure to stop by and sign that. And then getting back to the application, the Daniels residence. So this application was before the project review board almost exactly a year ago. It's a single-family residence on South Street. They wanted to enclose an area that's currently steps leading entry to the house. They were proposing an 11-foot wide by 33-inch addition. As they've had the past year and went through some different things, they decided that the design wasn't perfect. I think there were some snow considerations they hadn't thought about. So they decided that they needed to expand from what they previously had approved. So they're still keeping the 11 feet, which is the extent of the facade of that addition portion, but they're gonna go out 69 inches, so they'll be closer to the road. All the material's still the same. They will have a solid facade of vinyl siding to match the house. There'll be peaked roof with shingles, and then underneath they're gonna do skirting. They will have to take up some walkway, as there'll no longer be a door there, and they will grass that over. It's also in the Village Overlay District, but because it's an existing single family, there's no standards in that document that this board has to design. For existing single families, they come under the purview of the code officer. So from a staff perspective, we don't have any concerns with the application. The applicant, the Daniels, are here tonight if you have questions or need more information from them.
Okay, are there any, would you folks like to say anything?
Oh, no, just that we, when we realized what was happening with the window that was below the addition, it was like, oh my God, rain, snow, it was
Okay.
gonna harm the building with the existing placement. And now we have to go beyond that window, which is another 36 inches. Originally 33, 36 more makes it 69.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
No.
Just one question from me. Will there be windows facing the South Street side on the
There will be,
addition?
there was a window there now, we will just be bringing it forward.
I see, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? None. No, okay. Entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion. Do I need to read it?
You don't
or-
need to read?
So I will make a motion that we approve the residence at 19 South Street, Daniel's residence, and the motion is as written.
Okay, any seconds?
We don't need to read it out loud?
No, because we don't have anybody, Jim is not online yet. We're all present right now.
Oh, great. Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Ford. Yep. All those in favor? Okay, all approved?
Okay.
Unanimous? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Our next item is Thomas Mosier Building, Main Street, Design Review Certificate. Let's see. Caroline, go. Oh, for Thomas Mosier? No. Okay. Okay, then why don't we skip that one?
We could wait till Carolyn comes back in.
Yeah, yeah. But why don't we move on to, since Tim is here, Brett Pierce, Carrie Michaels, Cunningham Road, shoreline stabilization, and they are seeking an approval for shoreline zoning permit for shoreline stabilization.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tim Forrester with Atlantic Environmental, here on behalf of the Michaels and Carrie Michaels and Brett Pierce, 23 Cunningham Road. So this particular site, they own sort of the inside of the cove around the point and then around to the other side of the bay. A fairly large amount of shoreline there, and there's been a handful of stabilization projects in and around the adjacent area, and one adjacent to the property further in the cove. So they asked us to take a look at it, and we came up with an approach that really just focused on the worst areas of erosion around there, one of which is fairly significant. The other two, well, one of them is tighter into the cove, so we ended up with 3 different prescriptions on how to resolve the issue. And the area deeper into the cove has a lot of vegetation along the embankment and is really just undercut right at the head of the salt marsh where it touches into the upland. So in that area, we didn't want to come in and put a lot of stone. We didn't want to bring equipment in over the salt marsh. And we certainly didn't want to cut all the trees from the upland side. So the method there is like a soft engineering approach of what are called core logs. They're a coconut fiber mesh. You can get them in different diameters, but a 20-inch diameter log, in this case, fills the void perfectly. And they allow the soil to come in, get in, embed into the log, and allow for regeneration and plant growth, and then stop the wave action from continuing to eat away in that spot. And those are held in place with a hemp rope and what's called a duckbill anchor. And all this work's done by hand. The duckbill anchors are basically, you drive them in on a rod and the rope is attached to it, and when you get it down into sufficient depth, you pull back on it and the anchor turns sideways and locks into place in the substrate, and then you can lock those logs down in. So that's the majority of the work on the inside, which is, I think, 265 linear feet. And then adjacent to that, there's an area that's pretty significantly eroded, stems from the bottom, from the edge of the marsh right up to the top of the embankment. So it's about 6 feet. And in that area, we are doing a more traditional stabilization approach of large diameter, irregular stone. That'll come in with a skid steer and have an excavator place that material. There's a couple of trees that'll be removed and an access way created to get us down onto the shore, which in that area is more ledge and cobble. So there'll be no real impact to salt marsh in that area. And then the last spot is sort of around front, much smaller, but still showing enough erosion that it should be dealt with. And for all of that, we can actually just reach right over the bank with a small excavator and place those stones. It's only 2 to 3 feet in size. And that's our project. So.
Thank you. Carolyn, did you have anything to add?
I did have one more thing to add, if I may. So the project is also reviewed by the Army Corps of Engineers, Maine Department of Environmental Protection. As part of that, we send out a notice to Maine Historic Preservation and the 5 Indian tribes in Maine. We did receive notice back from Maine Historic that there's a shell midden on site. So we looked into that a little further. I spoke several times with Art Spies, who's one of the state's historic preservation officer, sent him some additional information, and basically the shell midden it's in the worst spot of erosion, so it's basically all exposed and like 90% failed and fallen apart. So they're signing off on that as it's basically a loss, and the stabilization will actually, from their perspective, they want to see it stabilized and protected and almost buried so that it's preserved as an artifact in that way. So the stabilization work would actually help it. So, but I just wanted to raise that point because I know archaeology is one of your criteria in here. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Carolyn, did you have, since we...
No, I didn't really have any concerns. I think he did a good job summarizing it. I did have questions about the Maine Historic Preservation, so I did kind of ask him about that, and he did send me some documentation to show that they've been in contact with the state. I think my comment is just more general. This is the third one of these shoreline stabilizations that we've seen. It's new to this board. It's here because under the DEP requirement, shoreline stabilization projects are supposed to be going to the planning board. In the case of Freeport, the project review board serves the traditional role that a planning board serves in many other communities. The only standards that we look at are the shoreline zoning standards. Those are our standards that we have to meet the state minimums under which we need to review. Again, a lot of them are not going to apply with the stabilization. There is a specific standard on stabilization. There's some on vegetation, stormwater erosion. Internally, we do rely heavily on the code officer to consult with us when these applications do come forward. We've talked about how they need permits from outside agencies. Those are independent agencies with independent standards. Although they do get DEP permits, it's a different branch of DEP and it is different standards. There could be overlap. I don't know what they are because they're separate standards, but just kind of want to clarify the process, why they're here. And I think as we go through them, we'll have questions or different concerns or things that we need to learn. So reach out as we do that. Otherwise, I don't have any questions or concerns with the application.
Okay. Are there any questions?
I have one question, I think only one, hopefully. On your drone, I don't know what the name of it is, Exhibit 5 on the project plans. I'm looking at sheet 1 of 3. And you talk about also having a access way by a 12-foot wide driveway coming down to the area where the I guess this one is showing the area B, that's where that drive is going down.
Yep.
So my question is, I understand we're doing stabilization, shoreline stabilization, but do you have to clear that long, full path for 12 feet wide from wherever it's hard to see on the picture where their typical driveway access is. I assume it's going from their house property line and then coming down for whatever, maybe 150 feet, maybe it looks like?
Sure, I can elaborate on that. So you can see that their existing primary residence is at the top of the page, and about half of the building is in there. But in this property, they also have several other buildings and, summer cottages or outbuildings closer to the shoreline. And there is a road that exists for probably 90% of the proposed access. So the only place where we're doing any additional work, is right as you come down that, it turns to get to the shore. There's a fence line and a couple of trees right there that we need to remove in order to get down on the shore. It may be shown a little bit better in one of the pictures if I have it.
I have your pictures up here if you know which one.
Yep. Yeah, there's not a great one that demonstrates that.
See which one I'm talking about? Did you look?
What sheet is
Yep.
that?
It's sheet 1 of 3 of
Yep, this one. that we have here.
5.0.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, bring this one back up. Yep. So the existing house is here, and this is basically a road, a driveway. It's kind of a woods road, sort of. These are summer type camps. But all of this is already in existence. And then right here is where we propose to access. So we're coming down the existing road, and then it's actually kind of open. That's just the overstory of the adjacent trees that you see. So we're only really disturbing this one spot right here.
Okay, thank you, that clears it up.
Any other questions?
If you step up, if you could talk into this.
Okay.
What do you,
Does anybody out here in the public have any questions? Comments? Okay, seeing none. Is there a motion?
I'll read it.
Actually, you don't need to read it.
Oh, right. Still in streamlined mode.
If I'd known that.
There you go. You got some catch-up.
I know.
In order that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the applicant's submission as read and written. Is that it?
Sounds good.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Okay, unanimous. Sharon? Thank you very much, Tim.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Could I bring up a point of discussion about this in general right now, or is it something that I should hold off on?
Maybe we could talk about it towards after the end of the agenda, after we go
Okay, yeah.
through under non-agenda items.
Sure.
Excuse me.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I left the room because I
Yes.
noticed the applicant wasn't here for the
Yes.
second item. There
Here
was
now.
a confusion in location, so
Oh.
he's here now.
Okay. Then why don't we go back to the Thomas Mosier Building, Main Street Design Review Certificate. Caroline?
Sure, so the applicants here representing the Thomas Mosier Building, they have 3 entries to the building. The main entry with a walkway off of Main Street, and then 2 side entries. One has a ramp for the accessible access, and the other is stairs and a porch. They're proposing upgrade to the walkway. They want to change from the the stones and go to a brick paver. They're proposing new granite front steps. There was a picture of what those will look like that I had emailed to you earlier today. Since they are doing upgrades, the current railings do not appear to meet code, so they will be adding railing and balusters to meet code with regard to height and separation for the balusters. Details on that were included in the submission. As far as materials, there's a lot of change from wood to composite railings. The railing systems would all be white, and a lot of the boards that they're gonna put down for surfaces would be gray composite. I don't think I missed anything major, but Tom is here if you have more questions on the details of the application.
Covered everything.
Okay, would the applicant like to add to that?
No, I think Caroline covered everything that was submitted for review.
Great.
Unless you have any questions on what,
Are there any questions, comments? Okay, does anybody have any questions out there? Okay. Entertain a motion then?
Wait a minute. Tom Curtin, Tom Holmes Repair. What's this one?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
I'd like to move that we approve the printed findings of fact and design review certificate for Tom Curtin, Tom's Home Repair at 149 Main Street as proposed, as written, and as, what's the last one? Written and presented.
Read.
And read. Written, read.
Sounds good.
Proposed.
In the staff report.
Yes,
Okay.
in the staff report.
Is there a second?
second that.
Thank you. That was Jason, Sharon. All right,
That's it.
all those in favor? Okay, unanimous, Sharon. Thank you very much. And let's see, our next item is Mass Landing LLC, Conway Street, Rogers Road, Site Amendment Plan. Caroline.
So although there's a new name, which always happens with subdivisions and big projects that come through, these are more commonly known as the Divine Capital Apartments on Desert Road, the 144 units, and the 6 buildings over near the interchange. As they have built out the project, they have made some modifications on the site. They have also made some modifications to the building. When they put all of those modifications into a memo, it was beyond the purview of staff approval. The ordinance as written today really addresses modifications. It doesn't note increase or decrease in impervious area, which is quite often one of our big concerns. In this case, there's an overall decrease of impervious area on the site. I'll give you a quick kind of snapshot or rundown of some of the changes. They've had to make some changes to some of the walkways. They've done some changes to screening. They've moved around some pool equipment enclosures. They've done some screening changes to the dumpsters, modifications to the EV charging area. They moved the ground sign a little bit further away from the building. I think probably the biggest changes to what the board had seen in the past is they did modify the proposed patio and made the pool smaller in size, and then they had made changes to both the clubhouse building, which is the building closest to the road, and then to the maintenance building. The applicants here tonight, there were some renderings in your submission kind of showing are previously approved and existing. I believe they have some photos if the board wants to see those. Overall, there was a change in square footage change of a little under 4,000 square feet. Staff doesn't really have any concerns. It really wouldn't negatively impact the stormwater management system on the site due to the locations, really just adjusting slightly in the overall decrease in impervious area. Happy to answer questions if you have any.
I had one, just the renderings, it says proposed, or it says project review board footprint is one drawing, and then overlaid is as-built footprint. Which one was previously?
So the larger of the two, the gray, which
Yes.
is what was previously approved.
Okay.
And the blue was what was built.
Got it.
On the clubhouse, if you look at the elevation, you can see they kind of cut off the two ends and shrunk it in a little bit.
Okay.
That's the one that's the most
Okay.
visible of the two structures.
I have a question about, so what, the as-built is what's there.
Yes.
What was approved by the project review board is project review board. Why the change in facade, in look?
Or before we do that, maybe you'd like to just state anything that maybe Caroline missed or you'd like to?
Sure. I'm Bill Fletcher. I'm the attorney for the applicant. Here tonight with Aaron Hunter from Spago Technics, who's the project engineer. And I think Caroline nicely summarized that there were some changes, and frankly, the construction side of our house was thinking that these would be changes that would be staff reviewed and approved at final inspection. So it was an oversight on our part, and Caroline correctly directed us to you folks, but that's why they're after the fact. But these were largely driven, as I understand it, by costs greater than what was expected for the project. So there were some alterations that were made, as Caroline mentioned, to reduce the size of the clubhouse, the pool. I do think a fire pit and another amenity was added to the, like two gas grills were added to the amenities in the pool area. But that was the bulk of the changes. I think around a little less than 3,000 fewer area covered by, surface.
Okay.
So I guess my question still is, it's a very different look than what was approved. And I was curious, was the one built much less expensive? No columns. And my other question is, if a particular look is approved by the project review board and a different product is produced, quite different. I'm just trying to understand.
So anyone can come in and ask for a site plan amendment at any point in time. Usually they're done prior to construction, but, oversights happen in some ways they are after the fact. You still have to find that they meet the standards. So if you feel that a standard for site plan review or the section 527 is not being met, you can give them that feedback or guidance or act that way. They can make changes, but they still have to demonstrate that they meet the same standards. One of the questions I had for Bill Yetton, who's not here tonight, I was like, why did that facade change on that clubhouse building? Like, you just have this expanse and you had a window before and now it's missing. My understanding is that there's bathrooms in there? In that portion? Is that something?
Which side were you talking about?
The rear.
The
rear
clubhouse,
elevation.
actually, do you maybe want me to show those pictures, or were you gonna project stuff? That might actually help with some of the discussion.
If you have those pictures, that might be helpful. I will say, the clubhouse, these changes, while their footprint sort of changes, it's the same high quality. I mean, it really looks great. It's not altering sort of the, proposal that was set before this body when it was approved.
Elevation. I think it's the left side elevation here.
No, I was looking at this one.
Oh, which of the,
I was looking at the first elevation after the building footprint.
You wanna hold your drawing up?
Yeah, this one. There's, in the verbiage, they talk about a colonial whatever, and
Is it
the as-built looks less colonial to me than what project review board approved.
Is it this building here that you're looking at, or no, the other one?
Which side view is it?
Yep, is
It
that,
does it say
It
which
says
side?
on the pages, it has a thing that says left side elevation
Front
or right
front
side.
elevation,
is
yes.
this what you're calling the front elevation?
Is that
I think
it?
that's the side. I think we have another
That's the
photo
side, 'cause there's some sort of
that's
glass
looking
over
from
this
Desert Road.
Glass door,
Yeah.
or it looks like a glass door. I
The
don't know, it just
the
looks
front
markedly
elevation is very different.
So that's the,
You want
that
to
one
talk
right
about
there
this?
is the,
Sorry, I'm
the
going.
rear elevation is what we call it.
You call
So
it
that's
Desert
along
Side Road rear?
Desert Road.
This one,
This elevation here?
yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we identify as the rear elevation on the second page after the elevations.
Okay, well, I was looking, what jumped out at me was the front elevation,
Okay.
And- and
I think many of these elevations are showing differences that, in the short time that I've been here, there's been so much discussion on many applications on the design and the windows and placement of columns and things. So it disturbs me, because this is an after-the-fact change, that if this had come forward, there would have been a lot of discussion, and now you could say, well, it's not the same, but we're not going to ask them to take it apart and redo it. I just feel that there's, should be a more determined effort on the part of contractors or builders to come in advance of changing. If it was an error, so you say, you know, the builder went there and did this without realizing. But I just think it should be noted that there should be a more forethought in changing and coming in and getting an approval after the fact.
Do you just want to clarify that this is different than a lot of the stuff we look at because it is not in design review? So just keep that in mind. It's just the site plan review standards, and then that one section 527, which does have some facade requirements, but it's not design review. So typically, it's hard because we're used to commenting on every little building material when stuff's in design review, but this is outside of the design review district. So the standards are that 602 or that 527, which I would say are more of a guidance and less detail oriented. They're still important, they still give guidance, and there's still facade criteria, but less about the cut sheets and the width of trim and.
And I think the reduction in impervious surface is always a good thing. So and you save money.
I appreciate your point, too, of this is not our practice, certainly to come in after the fact. And I also, I'm thankful for the clarity on that point, Caroline, because I don't remember at the time of this review and approval, there was a lot of discussion about those sort of aspects, you know, the details of the clubhouse itself. It was more of the structure and the location and.
There actually was quite a bit of conversation about the facades and the visibility of the facades from the right-of-way, the abutting property, which is what the standard is. They did spend quite a bit of time in the general appearance, but it is a different level of detail than some of the other. And then I will say, in regards to staff approval, you know, this is a situation where the applicant does a lot of work in a lot of different towns, and we acknowledge that our thresholds for things are different or lower than different communities, and we are looking at increasing them. So in this case altogether, even when we make, if the changes go forward that we talked about for site plan review and some of the thresholds, this probably still would have come to you, but some of this would have been able on its own to come under staff approval. Just kind of clarify some background for you.
That's a good question, Todd.
Go ahead, Ford.
So I share Lynn and Linda's concerns about the, I mean, it's very clear which was the more expensive plan, and it was, in every elevation I look at, what we looked at originally is a more elaborate, appealing, expensive plan. And how does this work procedurally? There was a building permit issued, right?
There was a building permit issued. I believe it was on the original drawings. They made changes in the field. And again, if you guys have a concern that this does not meet a standard in 527, even though it's there, you would have to make a finding, but you are not obligated to approve this if you feel like there's an issue. I think you would need to be really clear to the applicant what standard you have concerns about in either 602 or 527 that they're not meeting, so that they could be given a chance to make modifications that you think they would feel could demonstrate that they meet the criteria that you're concerned about.
So in terms of how this went through through the building permit process, were these changed, was this all built without coming back and amending the building permit also?
I have not pulled the building permit, so I cannot affirmatively comment on that. I don't know if.
I
don't
wasn't
think you've
involved in
been
that
into Pullman's either,
aspect.
Bill.
Yeah,
But-
sorry, I can't answer that.
And to follow that up is, how does the codes inspector, or who would go out to take a look at it as something like this is under construction to ensure conformity with the building permit? Does that happen
I believe
on a
this
project this size, or how does that work? Do we know?
changes in the field, actually. So Adam, our town engineer, does the site plan approval. So every time you approve something, he goes out and look at the site modifications. In this case, the modifications that happened here were flagged by the code officer as not matching what was approved by the board. So he said, you guys need to reach out to Caroline because this isn't what you had approval for.
Okay, and meanwhile, construction continued on and things got closed up and.
Yeah, so they're at the point that they wanted a final certificate of occupancy and it's not being issued because they don't have approval from you guys.
Okay.
On these, they have
Okay.
approvals on other
I'm
stuff.
I'm just going a little bit further. I'd be curious to know if it makes any difference, but I'd be curious to know what the timing of this was. Was this, because this, it looks like this work was done, many, many months ago. And, when was it picked up? And we're seeing it now when it appears, I haven't been down there for a long time, but it appears to be substantially complete, and you're looking for a certificate of beneficial occupancy, which means it is complete. So when was this picked up, and why wasn't this, raised further, rather than, hey, we're done, and
I don't know exactly when it was flagged. Again, in this case, it's not a standard, but it's definitely a conversation we can have. I know, the developer, who's not here tonight, his team's representing him, but he had reached out, and he was under the impression or hope that a lot of this could be done under staff approval. So when I went back to them and said, okay, we'll put it all together on a plan and show me what you are, we realized it was over the threshold. They couldn't make the submission deadline for last month, so they did have to wait another month. So, I mean, I think it's fair to say they've been waiting like 2 months to get to you just with our meeting schedule, but it was definitely flagged before that time. I would again steer you guys to 527 to really look at those standards and see which ones you're concerned about. I mean, I know there's concerns about the process and how they got to
yeah, I
where they
think
are.
we're talking
but
about two different things.
Yeah, that's not what,
Yeah, I think beneficial to this discussion is the fact that it is making the footprints smaller and more, impervious. It's doing a better job on placing it on the land. And if this came in front of us, we would say, gee, you did a good job. So for me, it's a good thing to do. The process is, which the other half of this is a problem. And, I don't know, a slap on the wrist, that's what I give, but I don't know what anyone else wants to do about it. I mean, if we hold up approval, it's already done, so I don't know what the process would be going to the next meeting, I
Well, it
don't.
would also have to have a basis for that as well.
Right. I mean, I'm not prepared to ask for an approval held up, for any reason.
Right. Jason?
Having been on the design side of these sort of projects, things always change after
Sure.
the fact of completing a review like this. It would have been better to inform the code enforcement of major changes along the way to ease the process along. Maine is not particularly strict about that process or having any formality to it. Other states have much more of a regulatory approach to changes to buildings as they progress. I think in this case, just looking at the elevations and the changes to the scale, it feels a little more like a natural fit into the site, and the design is a little less stiff than the one that was there previously. So I don't have any problems in that sense. So I sort of maybe concur with you that there's no reason to hold it up, but I don't know if there's a better way to have future construction projects follow along a process that allows changes to fall into the hands of the code officer to.
yeah, I will say, we're a small town, so for Freeport, this is a really big project. This is bigger than a lot of things we've ever seen. To that note, they're still not done. They're still building out the back half of this, so I think they heard you very clearly tonight. And if there's any changes they want to make, they will hopefully come in prior to. They hadn't made changes, to my knowledge, to the residential buildings that they've been constructing. I think there's maybe 3 to go, is that right? Are
I
you?
think that's right, in
2
the
or 3?
in the back.
6 total, so I think they heard you clear on that, if they're going to make future changes.
Did you have anything you'd add?
Well, no, I too I'm not judging one design versus another. It's the question of the change and the principle, and I mean, it's helpful to know that we really didn't have that kind of control over design. I was not on the board when it was approved, so I'm seeing the original for the first time, and I'm seeing the change. And I was wondering what happened, because, or could that, might others assume the same? you know, we have a couple big projects going
We
on
do,
right in
and that's-
downtown.
That's what I was just thinking when you were talking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
precedent setting, you know, because
so let's learn from this.
I'm not a lawyer, you
Yeah.
are. but-
Gordon, did you have anything?
No, it's all the procedure. I mean, this is the
Yeah.
biggest project we've had, and we went to a lot of effort to make sure there was public comment and everything, and then I just, in the future, I hope this doesn't happen again.
Okay. So, well, why don't we wrap this up unless there's any other comments?
Actually, let me just check on Zoom for you.
Zoom, since we are on Zoom. Sorry, I haven't been checking with you on Zoom.
Actually, sorry, Jim, we just see there, I'm gonna promote board member Jim. But otherwise, there's no members of the public on
Okay.
Zoom.
Jim, I don't know when you joined us, but do you have any comments?
Not as to the last item. I joined right at the very end of the discussion. So I think nothing further on what's been said so far.
Okay. Just before we do entertain a motion, I would suggest that perhaps staff can take a look at the process for these larger projects, because as Lynn pointed out, we do have a few of them that are working their way through the system. And if we can come up with a means to better catch this and to, again, it's a new project this time. So, with that in mind, being there no additional comment, okay.
I'll make a motion.
Entertain a motion, and now we have to read it.
Mine's on my screen. Can I borrow yours?
Yes. It's there somewhere.
It's a short one, Ford.
You have it in front of you. Here's my proposed motion. Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the printed findings of fact and site plan amendment from Mass Landing LLC for modifications to the previously approved site plan for residents at Cross Street, located on Conway Street and Rogers Road, tax map 22, lot 24, application dated September 28, 2022, to be built substantially as proposed, finding that it meets the standards of Freeport zoning ordinance with the following conditions of approval. This approval incorporates by reference all supporting plans that amend the previously approved plans submitted by the applicant and their representatives at Project Review Board meetings and hearings on the subject application to the extent they're not in conflict with other stated conditions, and 2, past conditions of approval are still applicable.
Second.
Okay.
If, hold on. Number 2, past conditions of approval are applicable with the, I mean, should we add something about with the, including the new changes that have,
That's really there just to capture, like, they had to do a performance guarantee and they had to record certain documents, getting at those kind of standard conditions of approval. Because they're still building out, they have conditions from the original approval they still need to adhere to. You can definitely modify, it's your motion, you can modify it, but I'm just clarifying the intent of that for you.
okay. It's not my motion, though, but.
I'll let my motion stand because I think it's included unless people want.
Okay.
Okay, are we good?
Yep,
Okay.
Is
All
there
right.
a second?
Yes.
I seconded.
Lynn seconded. Yes, all right, and we need to do a roll call vote. 'Cause- Yes. Berger?
Yes.
Yes. Jason?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Riker, yes.
Jim?
Abstain, having missed much of the presentation.
Fair enough, and the chair says yes.
Thank you.
Unanimous with one abstention.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next one is the Freeport Town Hall, Main Street Design Review Certificate and Site Plan Amendment.
So you have Adam Bliss, our town engineer here, representing this application. There is a The application before you is largely site plan modifications out front of Town Hall. We have a nice big green space that is underutilized. The changes include doing some fill in the area, bringing up the grade, and doing some beautification, pedestrian improvements, circulation improvements. We're proposing some granite outdoor seating in the front area. I think a couple of the big site changes would be, one, restriping and kind of fixing the parking area and the driveway that's coming into Town Hall. There will be kind of a relocation of the accessible parking spaces, but not an overall decrease. There's a slight increase in impervious area on the site. One of the second big changes would be, as part of the accessibility improvements, this proposal suggests removing the front stairs at the building, and also on the side entrance, removing the stairs and ramp. And with the grade changes, there will be a accessible pathway without steps that will lead right to the building entrances, so that people of all abilities can easily access the town hall site, the parking area, and then come right into the building. Adam is here tonight, and he can walk you through the site plan, and we also have Peter here tonight.
I'm not here to present that.
He's just the public, I guess.
Thank you. Adam? Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Adam Bliss. I serve as your town engineer. Thank you, Caroline, for introducing the project. I have pretty pictures and I have black and white technical pictures. I'll start with the black and white because it gives the overall picture. It provides you how we're going to phase the project in terms of construction. And then I'll show you the pretty pictures because it gives a better feel for what we are proposing here at Town Hall. So this plan is what we call our site and landscape plan. This project started originally as a simple stormwater project from a grant we received through the DEP. And in talking with staff, we brainstormed and thought, hey, why don't we explore opportunities to make this ADA accessible? And then we coupled that idea with the downtown vision study that we've been going through for a couple of years now. And so all of these elements, design elements, came together. In a few words, welcoming, making the front lawn area accessible, more enjoyable to be at, a place where people can come and have a cup of coffee, a conversation, just better public gathering space. So what we see here is the site plan. In red is I'll call it the Main Street or front entrance. That's phase one. We'll focus on that first. Phase two, outlined in blue, I'll call the parking lot or side entrance just for reference. Priority is in red, so we can make these improvements, hopefully starting in the springtime, and have it ready for summertime in concert with other downtown vision projects that may start to happen. We want to demonstrate to the public, to the residents, everybody, the stakeholders that gave input during the downtown vision study, that we are committed to revitalizing downtown. This is a project that supports that study, and here's how it does that. So shaded in gray, we have new walkways. Right now the walkways are at 90 degrees and they're awkward. We have one that goes down to Grove Street that almost no people use. We have a set of steps at the midpoint of the sidewalk of Main Street that people do use. And then we have a few people that use the intersection of the at the driveway where that walkway is. And so as we dove deeper into that front lawn area, we discovered that it's cluttered, it's congested, it's underutilized. And then we took another step back and said, how can we make Town Hall more accessible? So here's an example. When people park, they use the crosswalk, and they get to the crosswalk where it currently is, and they have this ambiguous decision of, do I go right or do I go left? 90% of the people go right, which is okay, but we want that to be more of a 50-50 mix. And this layout makes that decision a whole lot easier. So again, focusing on the front, we have about 20 feet away from the front porch area, right over here, is this congregation circle. It's a circle, 20-foot diameter, with radial granite benches for seating. We have these walkways that connect into it, all graded at less than 2% slope. There are no steep kind of ramps going down. It's all gentle grading. And to accomplish that, we have to bring the grade up, and then we'll feather that back into the landscape. So in terms of landscape, we have lawn area, and surrounding the circle is this ellipse of planted gardens, stormwater treatment ponds, and around the ellipse is a granite block seat wall. And along the walkways, we've got pedestrian bollard lighting, 42 inches tall, full cutoff LED fixtures, designed to cast a smooth light rather than an overhead glaring light. And lastly, in terms of the front lawn area, we have bike racks. We have street trees on the back side of the sidewalk. And we've spread out a lot of the congestion by relocating the Armed Services Monument that a lot of people don't realize is there, and the flagpole, and we're moving it so it's front and center and visible from the parking lot. When people that park and cross, they see the monument, they see the flagpole in an honorable way. So phase two, we have to phase this because we have to provide accessible entrances continuously. So phase two will happen, and that's more focused on walkways and adding additional parking. Right now, staff parks in a private lot out back, which there's no guarantee we'll be able to do that forever. So let's take the opportunity to capture additional parking where we can. And so we're adding a positive net 5 parking spaces. We tried to carve in some more spaces, but it wasn't possible. In phase 2, we intend to include a couple of EV charging stations in this far west corner. And lastly, before I go to the pretty picture, to give you a better feel of what this will look like, are these retaining walls that make the walkway accessibility possible.
You also, excuse me, I read that you were going to add some parallel short-term parking?
Correct, yep.
Yep. Did you say that? Sorry.
Yep, 3 parallel spaces, which will be accomplished by relocating curb line to accommodate 9-foot wide spaces and a 15-foot wide drive aisle. So that curb line needs to move about 3 feet to make that happen.
Can you just point where the drive entry is from Main Street?
Sure. Let me try going to the pretty picture. I think it's easier to kind of understand. The drive aisle is right here.
It's the same location it's currently in?
Same location, yep. And so this is obviously the overhead colored rendering of the site. I do have an elevation, which I'll be happy to show you. This is of the front lawn area, viewed from the sidewalk out here. Again, its purpose is to encourage gathering, community, conversation, a place for people, a respite, should somebody want to just take a load off after having walked around, shopped, and shade, right? We know that people like to relax in green space, not parking lots. And they like shade in the heat of the summer, and they like light and greenery and vegetation, so. I think I'll pause and answer any questions you might have.
I understand that you received a grant.
We did, yes.
Congratulations. I think it's such a great way to give it, 'cause you're talking about this spring.
Yeah, yep.
It's such a great way to tell the community we are moving forward with the vision and have it set by the town itself. So it's a great first toe in the water, as it were. And I think it'll be very exciting and encouraging to make others wish to do the same.
Thank you.
Ford?
Nice presentation. Are there any mature trees that get lost in this?
No, we have preserved every one of them. We had to massage the walkway location, not much, but I met with many people, stakeholders, including the town's arborist, and he said, if you can save that birch tree, and we have 4 or 5 out there, but if you can save that one that, he's like, you really should. It's got 35 years of growth. It's probably a $20,000 value. So I said, great idea, Mike. And so the intent is to preserve all of them.
My other question, I don't think it comes in the blue zone of your other drawing, but if the project next door gets approved, there's a request to reroute some traffic. Does that tie into what you're doing at all?
Does it not? No, it doesn't. Only with respect to the limit of disturbance. Now, will there be vehicles potentially using the shared driveway that goes out to Depot Street and West Street? Yes.
And that's proposed to be one way out only, right?
Correct, yep.
Is it one way out now?
It is one way out, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are you you're not proposing to change the entry drive from Main Street into a two-way? It's still going to be one, and the traffic pattern will continue to be the traffic pattern?
Correct, yep.
Jason?
Couple questions. One is a curiosity question. I'm trying to figure out the magic trick you did to make 5 more parking spaces here, but I'll believe it.
Oh, okay.
And it looks like you've made the turn into the lot more forgiving than what's out there today when it comes to vehicular movement.
I did.
So that's a nice touch.
Thank you. I'm impressed you noticed that, and I'd be really impressed if you identify why.
Why?
to put you
Well,
on
I've
the
driven in
spot.
there and it's like a really hard.
Earl,
Wheel over, but
Earl, our fantastic public works superintendent, said, is there any way you can make it easier for the plows to get in and out? And I said, wow, I actually didn't think of that.
yeah.
So hence this radius that Jason is referring to has been made a lot easier for the truck to make that turn without having to do a 3-point turn. Anything we can do to help them, yeah.
And then one area that I'm a little concerned about is at the entrance drive with cars coming into the parallel space. Basically, the driver is on the curb side, which is different.
On the sidewalk side, you mean?
Sidewalk side, yeah, right. And then particularly with the handicap space and someone getting out of the car and maneuvering around, where I know there's not a lot of traffic that flows through there, but if there's some sort of way to encourage the traffic that does pass to move as slowly as possible.
I share your concern. Do I think there's a risk for an accident? No, but I know how people drive, you know. It's always A to B as quickly as possible.
Right, right.
So I share your concern.
Is there an obvious, am I missing something obvious? Why wouldn't the parking be on the other side of the road?
Well, from one perspective, ADA accessibility, we want them as close to the building as possible, but other reasons, that was actually the original design from '86 and '87, which never happened. And yeah, it's a good question.
Could that ADA space be worked into the main lot and just kind of?
It could be. As I mentioned, I met with many stakeholders, including ADA Task Force and their design consultant, Alpha One, and Jill encouraged us to, if you can, have an ADA spot in one of the parallel spaces.
Interesting, okay.
And currently, there is one right in front of the door.
Right, yeah.
There's
right.
that one there.
Yeah.
But
It's
that
sort
one's
of tucked
gone.
in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That one's removed now.
correct. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You-
Just, I had a couple questions. One is the granite retaining wall. How high is that?
It is, you will see 30 inches high. It'll be embedded 6 inches, so we have stability. It's basically a 36-inch block, but embedded 6.
So it's essentially will be a bench if people
Yeah,
want to sit on
yeah.
it.
Yep,
Right, okay.
yep.
Okay. And then I share your question about, if that is developed over there, how will that impact, because there will be cars coming in, more traffic coming in, certainly more traffic going out, and I can't remember the flow pattern. Would traffic be coming into service over there or just going out over here?
Only out. I don't think they can
Only
use
out.
our driveway to access their that
It was a
project.
one-way going out from their,
That's what it was.
Building, I'm
from
pretty
West
sure.
Street
Yeah.
They
out.
both show one way. I think there could be potential for flexibility to look at, I think, directionally what way's the best, but because of the width of this design and that design, they wouldn't be able to do two-way because they wouldn't meet the standards of the
Right.
ordinance.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
off the table. There is actually a connection there now. It's like a dirt connection, but I think
Right.
it's a little bit closer to like where the scale
Exactly.
is on the bottom
Yeah.
right. But
Right there.
as far as that bigger discussion, that still would have to go through council and,
Okay.
it's not I don't think given at this point in time.
Okay.
this one comes first. If we approve this now, it
And
comes
then-
first.
In terms of weekend traffic, I mean, right now, that lot is being used, and people are parking here on weekends for special events, for the arts, and for the farmer's market. People are parking in the lot for that. Will having this traffic, because the driveway will be a little bit narrower, as I think you were noting, Linda, or Jason, is that gonna create any bottleneck if you've got parallel parking there and traffic still trying to get through, and maybe a person is trying to, handicapped is trying to get out of the car on the passenger side?
We've designed to the standard. In fact, we exceed the standard for the parking, parallel parking. Standard is 8. ADA, the federal standard is 8, but it's 9 on this plan, and we have 15 for the one-way. So we meet the standard in terms of width.
Okay. And just one last one, and it's related to the new ramp on the front, replacing the steps with a ramp. Will, and I'm sure it's here in the drawings, but will the grade be brought up in the front so that there's, because if I remember right, there's like 4 steps right now, right outside the front door. Will the grade be brought up so that there's not quite as much difference between
Yep.
the grade and the steps, top of the steps?
Yeah, yes, and it's a little hard to visualize because it's the third dimension, right? We look at the world in, well, we look at paper and TV in 2D, but it's 3D. So it's hard to visualize, but yes, it's coming up about 2 feet.
Okay.
And then feathering back into grade. And it's feathering back into grade within these shallow planted bioretention ponds, which will be dry. They're intended to fill up and then drain out pretty quickly, 24 hours or so. And they're intended to be lush and with perennials. And I've had more people, last Tuesday's Downtown Vision Workshop being one, I've had more people come up to me and saying, can I help design the plants we plant, the perennials we plant in there? I said, sure, you know. So.
I have, made me think of another thing I wanted to say, but let me start with what I wrote down. You said in the beginning of your presentation that because of the two doorway entrances, it was like confusing why people were going one way versus the other way. Were you planning on putting a signage as to, you know, like, this entrance gives you, because I think I read it in your documentation here, you know, land use offices this way versus a sign that shows something about the, you know, the town offices for finance and all that, you know, something that would make people have a reason when they're outside which way to go in. If that would be signage, then we'd
Yeah.
need to know signage, I assume. My other question is, there's a door, or at least a walkway, I guess, from Grove Street, that's over there, right? That's
Yeah.
Grove Street?
Yeah.
And are you getting rid of that entry walk from Grove Street entirely?
We are, yep.
So is there going to be, other than, like, I guess there's still a sidewalk over there that will come all the way around to Main Street, and then someone would have to walk all the way in if they ended up parking there?
Yes. Yep.
All right, and, okay, I mean, I might say, maybe you should have that walkway at least someplace so people could do that. I don't know how many people use that parking, that parallel parking over there to get into the building, but something to think about. And then my third question is, I think I read that you were using your rain gardens. One of the uses would be, from the water, would be for irrigation, and I'm just wondering if are you going to have some sort of sprinklery heads coming out of, I don't know, I'm familiar with rain gardens, and usually you expect that the water in the rain garden is going to irrigate what you're planting around it, but when you say irrigation, is that what you're talking about, or some other use?
Natural irrigation. So
As
we'll,
to where that is,
well-
where the rain gardens are?
yeah, those rain gardens are the collection
Right, okay.
reservoirs, right? They receive the runoff. They're graded for the runoff to drain there, rather than just shed off the street and not get treated at all.
So maybe I mistake what I was reading that said something about using it for irrigation and watering or something, but my assumption is it means for in-place water irrigation.
So no mechanical irrigation,
Okay.
but just all natural.
Okay. And then I'm going to throw out another suggestion for gardening suggestions, because it should be, I assume, native plantings,
Yep.
wild seed project,
Yeah.
saying it, and if they're involved, I will recuse. I have a relation to that business.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we want to encourage pollinators and butterflies. So yes, that is the intent.
I got a question. I know I'm in favor of this as is, and I know you've had all sorts of expert opinions, and here comes a non-expert opinion. I don't understand enough about this to see an important reason to have that parallel parking on the left when you're going in. I'll give you 3 layman's reasons why I would think it would be on the right. If I were bringing my 95-year-old dad or one of my grandchildren in here, I'd much rather be unloading them on the regular side of the road.
Oh, gotcha. Well, it's one way, but I understand.
Nonetheless, unloading them onto a sidewalk instead of onto traffic, right? And if I've got,
Let them out the other side of the car.
but if my dad if I pull in,
Passenger.
if I pull in, the driver's on the sidewalk side.
It's the passenger side,
My 95-year-old dad and my grandchild is on the traffic side.
Right.
So that's one of my 3 reasons. My other reason is it's not the norm. The norm, we always park on the right side of the road. And my third reason for doing that is the way it's drawn, I pull in there, I got cars on the right and cars on the left, and if you put it on the regular side, I got cars on the right and this beautiful view on the left.
You got me there.
Yeah.
For what it's worth. I'm
No,
not-
it's
It blocks
excellent,
it, yeah.
it's excellent input. I hope this comes across okay, but there is no such thing as 100% customer satisfaction, right? I know that there are some stakeholders out there that would say, we want it on the left for offloading of ADA, for ADA accessibility. So it's,
Into traffic.
no, if they're the driver and they're offloading onto the sidewalk.
Oh, if the ADA
Is the
Yeah.
driver.
is the driver.
Yes.
Got it,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah,
So
I
it's-
understand. Again,
Can I ask the board a question? There seems to be a little bit of unease about the parallel parking on the left-hand side. So should Adam look at this and decide that it could safely be accommodated on the right-hand side? For anybody else, that would be a change would sign off on, but I would summarize myself as being overly cautious on signing off on anything for the town. I always have it come to you. But I hear what the board's saying, I think Adam does too. If there's a way that he could look and possibly put that on the other side, is that something that we could put conditionally that we could sign off at the staff level on without making him have to come back?
I'm just, to help answer that,
Yeah.
I wonder if Jim has any questions or comments.
Thanks. And again, I apologize that I'm not there yet. I'm close, but not quite. So I would echo the concerns about the parking, where the exit's on the left side. That's atypical. I think it's highly likely that drivers will try and do a U-turn to try and turn around and get into park the traditional direction in that layout. But other than that, I think that these plans really look great. And to address Caroline's suggestion, certainly would be comfortable with a staff approval subject to adjustment of the parallel parking issue.
Okay, thank you. Are there, Lynn?
I would just like to say your proposed bollard lighting, I think will add to, I mean, it's a pretty building. And I always feel like I'm going in the back door the way we come in today. And so to make it an important part, which is your goal and your vision, to make it part of the town main street, I think it's great. I like it a lot, and it'll make town hall, people may notice that it's there, because of its color and the slope, it just sort of recedes and disappears. So you're bringing it forward and making it accessible and more beautiful. It's a good thing.
Thank you.
I just have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The grade at the northeast or north corner is kind of kooky with the way the sidewalks work, and there's some major pitch there. It seems like, from what I'm seeing on the plan, that the way that the path arcs its way through the site would actually be an easier path for someone in a wheelchair to traverse than trying to manage that unusual grade at the corner. Is that an accurate?
Jason, are you referring to this corner here?
Yeah, that one, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it will be a lot easier. It will be at about 1%, which is what I graded it out at.
Okay.
So no 5% or 8% down to a landing zone and then flat, but gentle.
Yeah.
And I did have to, similar to weaving the walkways around the trees, I had to be very careful about that walkway location because there's just some trees and structures in the way. So
And last comment is it's really a tour de force of grading and drainage and site lighting and plantings and creating an atmosphere that I think is really great. Should be something we'll all be very proud of.
I think we will.
Nice job.
Well, I know we will.
Did you have anything?
Yeah, I just want to add from the observational perspective, For the record, Peter Joseph, Town Manager here. Adam, thanks for your presentation. It's great and sums up, I think, the town's position. The question of the parallel parking, I certainly understand the concerns about the left-hand side. It's not the standard from what have been raised by the board members. And I agree with the comments on the two non-accessible parking spaces, but from an observational standpoint, the space that's about 10 feet or 20 feet to the diagonal upright, it's going to be essentially here, where it is now. That's being relocated there. I would say 80 to 90% of people who use that space for accessible parking are single driver vehicles. Most people get out of the vehicle there themselves and aren't offloading somebody else. That does happen for sure. So I don't know, that probably doesn't help anything about your discussion on it, because I'm saying that, yep, you're right on those two. It's absolutely not the right spot, but for the accessibility part, I think most of the people that are using the current space there would be better served by being on the left-hand side. So I don't know what the correct answer is, but just wanted to add that for the consideration.
And if it helps, we tried to fit 3 spaces between this drive aisle and this gray area is bedrock outcrop. It's not going to happen. There's just too much rock there. And but that parallel parking there with a 5-foot striped aisle would have been probably ideal. But physically, it just will not fit due to the bedrock. So it's a tight site, and tight sites can be challenging. Small sites, I should say, because you're kind of, you don't want to clutter them. You want to space them out, but real estate is at a premium.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments online? Any hands up, questions?
Nope.
Okay. Are there any more comments?
Yeah, I have one more question on this parking question. Are these ADA spaces, particularly the one on the parallel, van size, or?
Yep.
I mean, is there I don't know this particularly, but there could be regular car ADA and van ADA?
Van accessible are 11 wide with a 5-foot striped tile, and that's what we have.
So, and is that the same size as the other two that are further on the older section? You know, the blue part?
As they are today?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if they're 8. I think they're 8 and 8, which technically I don't believe is van accessible. But this one here, I believe is van accessible.
I'm just wondering, based on the width and the length of it, you know, moving it to the other side of that street maybe causes you to have more problems with the green walkway area that's still there, or, you know, whatever that your green area that I guess is not, you know, on the blue section. Would you have to cut out some of that? You know, if that would make a problem, it may not be worth it even to consider then.
You mean the space between the
If you
crosswalks?
changed it to the other side, the right side, which now I'm saying I don't think is a good idea based on what you were saying, but if you did change it to the right side parking, then you would have to change your green space there that's on there.
Yeah, it would shift. Yeah.
So and it might cause other
Yeah, I mean,
changes in
we have
that
a lot
area.
we have some crab apple. We have healthy, 35-year-old crab apples there that, you know, we'd rather not have to transplant, but.
All right. So if there's no other discussion, entertain a motion.
I'd like to propose that it be ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the printed findings of fact, design, and review certificate and site plan amendment for the town of Freeport for the proposed site and building operations at the Freeport Town Hall at 30 Main Street, Tax Assessor Map 11, Lot 130, application dated 9/28/22, to be built substantially as proposed, finding that it meets the standards of the Freeport Design Review Ordinance and the Freeport Zoning Ordinance with the following conditions of approval. This approval incorporates by reference all supporting plans that amend the previously approved plans submitted by the applicant and their representatives at project review board meetings and hearings on the subject application to the extent that they are not in conflict with other stated conditions.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. And I think everybody's here now,
Surprise.
so I think we can do, sorry, we can just do a hand vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous, Sharon. Thank you very much.
Thank
Very
you.
exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Very
nice.
exciting. Yeah. Our second to last item is persons wishing to address the board on non-agenda items. Are there any? Linda, did you have something you wanted to mention?
And I don't remember now what it was.
Shoreline stabilization, that's what we're
Right,
talking about.
thank you. So what I was going to say, actually, before we did that approval, but I'm talking now more in general terms, the idea of having other approvals from outside agencies, I know what you're saying, they're not the same thing, they don't relate specifically, but in my background of doing this, what I've found every once in a while, sometimes the board approves something and then the state or the DEP or something has also to do an approval, and so the applicant gets their approval, starts the work, and then the state says, oh, wait a minute, if you were going to do this, I need you to change the location of this. And it makes a conflict of how you change what's already been given by us. And I just feel that putting into your standard lines of approval in some of these cases, particularly Shoreline, the additional item about all approvals, you say from the town engineer, but all approvals, including any from the state, from the archaeological department, or whatever it is that is related, be included in a standard set of your approvals, if they fit that type of application.
So like just a general blanket statement, kind of up to them to figure out what they need.
But that they need to be, that they would need to be approved, that the approval would come from us, but it also, however we write these things, that there would be
As
the
a condition.
additional conditions as a standard on what you are offering to us.
Yeah, I think we can do that. I don't see a,
Yeah, it'll change based on the circumstances, but in general terms, that kind of situation where we need the DEP or expect it, to be written.
Does the shoreland work need a building permit from code enforcement? Or
certain things in the shoreline need certain permits from the code enforcement officer. Thank you. The applicant's always responsible for getting their outside agency permits, whatever they may be, and if they don't do that, that's a problem between two of them. But historically, like site location, because it's such a big review, much bigger than what we're talking about here, but that's something we make contingent a lot of times because we know it will result in changes. So I don't think it causes any harm by putting it there as a standard condition. We can't rely on them to do the town's job for them, but you can definitely flag them getting whatever outside approvals are necessary. I like the idea of somehow putting like a generic standard for these. I definitely don't feel like I know all the ins and outs of DEP, and there could be different tiers or different permits that are required. But I think if we do a general statement, that could flag it, and we wouldn't get it wrong
It's
if we keep
implied,
it
it's
general.
just a little bit more.
Yeah, just to flag it.
But we've had a few lately where we had to go, look and see what else would have been added as a third item, so.
Are there any other items?
If I could chime in on that same issue. Actually, looking back on some of the DEP approval papers, I see that the DEP findings on these shoreline stabilization projects are, although their standard is slightly different, their findings are directly on point with the findings that we are asked to reach, really without any level of expertise or understanding whatsoever. Seeing that, receiving that kind of informed input, particularly while we're at this kind of preliminary stage of reviewing these, I think is worth asking applicants to provide that to us before we consider the project. Because it's not a meaningful delay. These projects are typically drawn out over many months. It's not a matter of getting this weeks in advance. So it's not an unreasonable burden to say, let's just provide us the DEP findings, and then that will essentially provide us a rational basis to say, okay, we meet all the boxes, because people that know what they're doing here have evaluated this. One other comment I'd add on that is that traditionally, or I guess before the change was made, this was a process that the code enforcement officer was very closely involved on as to tree cutting. This is one of the rare exceptions that allows tree cutting in the restricted zone and is ripe for abuse. Even in my particular experience, it even involved 2 site visits from the code enforcement officer, plus a post-completion site visit, because it's taken very seriously. It's unclear to me under the new standard where that review happens, or if it's happening. And I think that's also very important. It's important that we figure out some way to at least fold in the code enforcement officer's review about tree cutting issues into our materials.
Okay. Any other comments?
I think Jim should make the motion to adjourn, so he'll feel included.
With that pleasant suggestion, I move that we adjourn now that I'm here for that part.
All right, all in favor? All right,
And there's
adjourned.
3 copies of the plan. If you can sign all 3, Guy is going to stop by tomorrow and sign the chairperson line if there's over there, so just keep the top line and then,
But it's just people who approved.
yep, which you approved, I think.
I
you-
did.
Yep,
But I
yeah,
didn't-
if you approve, I think everybody was here at the last meeting and it
Is that your pen?
approved the apartments down on the corner of Mill and Depot.
If you said no.
This isn't the mass landing plan, this is the
No,
plan that we
the plan
approved
from,
last
yeah, the
time.
depot.
Yes, yes.
Jason, I apologize if I called you Jim. All right. I think I did. Oh, did you? Okay. I missed it then. We called lots of things.
And Jim, I apologize if I called.
Coming from Bedford.